All right, Nathan, we're on a strict timeline today. I'd like to go ahead and get the, first ever Digital Inclusion Summit up and running. Can you take it from there?
Thank you so much, Sarah, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Land to Sky Regional Council Digital Inclusion Planning Summit. I want to thank everyone who has worked hard today to make the summit possible. First, I want to give a shout out to Erica Anderson, Director of Economic and Community Development at Land to Sky Regional Council, and Sarah Nichols, Regional Planner with Land to Sky. Erica and Sarah are leading our region's broadband efforts at Land to Sky, and they have made today's summit possible. Second, I want to extend our appreciation to North Carolina State University's Institute for Emerging Issues. They have led this effort statewide with their Band NC initiative, and we want to thank Maggie Woods, Program and Policy Manager with IEI, for their incredible support. There's so many other people to thank, and we just want to extend our appreciation to them. We're blessed to have an amazing team of presenters today, including philanthropy, elected officials, and national experts. So what is digital inclusion? Digital inclusion refers to the activities necessary to ensure that all individuals and communities, including the most disadvantaged, have access to and the use of information and communication technologies. These include 5 elements: affordable, robust broadband internet service, internet-enabled devices that meet the needs of the user, access to digital literacy training, quality, sufficiency, participation, and collaboration in their applications. And digital inclusion must evolve as technology advances. Digital inclusion requires intentional strategies and investments to reduce and eliminate historical and institutional and structural barriers to access and use of technology. The COVID-19 health pandemic has caused significant disruption and stress, as you already know. Our region faced broadband inclusion challenges before March, but the pandemic has enhanced those challenges. Our region's West NGN broadband effort has been focused on broadband deployment, and that is not the only part of digital inclusion. Working in the digital inclusion space gives us the opportunity to impact more lives in this region with more diverse offerings of meaningful contributions through things like access to device, digital literacy programs, or a public place to connect. We know our region faces many hurdles to digital inclusion, and here are a few facts gathered from our broadband survey several years ago. 12% responded as not having internet access, and that was probably much higher due to the nature of that survey. 63% of the people who could get service but didn't have service say it's due to the cost of the service, and over 65% needed internet access for schoolwork, and 90% considered it to be an essential service such as water and electricity. So let's get started finding solutions to promote digital inclusion in our region. I'm honored to introduce Dr. Susan Mims, Interim CEO at Dogwood Health Trust. I've known Dr. Mims for almost 2 decades, and she is absolutely a visionary leader for our region. Dr. Mims has served our region in many roles, and she has an impressive background. Previously, she served as medical director for the Buncombe County Health Department. She was chief of pediatrics at Mission Health. She was vice chief of staff at Mission Health. She was chief executive of the Mission Children's Hospital. And most recently, she was chair of the Department of Community and Public Health at UNC Health Sciences at Mayheck. I don't know anyone better prepared or more capable of leading Dogwood Health Trust at this critical time than Dr. Mims. Dr. Mims, thank you for joining us today, and I'll now turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Can you all hear me all right? Great. Thank you for that very generous introduction. And yes, we have enjoyed working together over the years, and I so appreciate working with the community, and I'm excited to be in this role. I am really excited about Dogwood Health Trust priority of broadband, and really being here to listen and learn about this really critically important conversation. While as Mr. Ramsey said. I've only been at Dogwood for a short period of time. I have seen through my previous work just how the limitations in access to broadband, especially in our rural areas, but across Western North Carolina, present challenges to really health and the ability to thrive for all of our Western North Carolinians. We know that we have seen how the COVID pandemic has highlighted the reliance on broadband access in every aspect of our lives, and that the infrastructure really is a necessity of modern economy and a critical part of our everyday existence, including things like our access to healthcare and education. And I think being in the healthcare world, I have seen that any hesitancy that we had either as patients or healthcare providers in accepting telemedicine as a new way of life, I think has largely been overcome just out of the necessity of receiving care in the pandemic in the safest way possible. And I am sure that the process of delivering healthcare is forever changed by what we're learning. And we will continue to learn how to do that better. It will evolve, but I'm sure virtual access to care will take the best of what we're learning and apply that to the future. I think we also know that virtual education, while it may not be ideal for all children, it is a necessary element right now, and will probably change the way we deliver education in the future. We know that right now, especially having our children have access to that broadband service that they need to do their education, to try to minimize the education gap that we know is happening in COVID is essential. I wanted to share with you briefly a story from a child in Madison County who lives next door to a friend of mine, and shared their experience about a second grader. In order to upload his homework, they have to drive their four-wheeler up the mountain to the top of a cow pasture to get enough cell service to get the work turned in. And in rain, sleet, or snow, this is their only option. The closest publicly available Wi-Fi is 30-minute drive to the public library. That is a struggle. And we know our children need better. I will say I did listen with a little bit of nostalgia during the last week's snowstorm when the newscast announced. I thought I was expecting when the snow came, they announced the snow day, and I heard, kids, it's a virtual learning day. And I thought, how is our world changing? So we know this is critically important. We know the inequities among our rural communities, among populations who've historically been underserved, are broadened at this time. And I think despite our current challenges and being kind of thrust into increased broadband dependence in a rapid fashion during the pandemic, we have an opportunity here to take that light that's shining on this need and do something about it. And I think that's why Dogwood Health Trust has made this issue a priority. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you today to really learn where those opportunities are for partnership in this effort. So thank you very much for having me, and I look forward to a great conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Mims. We're so grateful to have Dogwood's leadership on this and so many important issues that Western North Carolina is facing today. My name is Sarah Nichols. For those who don't know me yet, I'm a regional planner at Land to Sky, and it's very exciting to see so many people show up for this event today, friends old and new, taking an interest in digital inclusion. It has been very exciting for us to move this conversation forward. So to get us started, if you want to go ahead, and we're going to keep everyone muted. It's a big event. We'll open that up as we need to. But if you want to introduce yourself in the chat box, tell us your name, maybe where you work or who you feel like you represent today. Let's make this as dynamic as possible. I also have a poll that I'll be throwing up at some point so we get a little bit more information about who's here today. If you want to turn your camera on so we see you and we We know the faces that have joined us today. We would love that. We also understand if your bandwidth isn't strong enough to do that, or you have something else going on that makes that not work for you today. I hope that you'll consider it for the breakout sessions, which will be coming later. I have the distinct pleasure of working with regularly Amy Huffman and Maggie Woods, who will be speaking with us today. These incredible ladies are exemplary leaders, advocates, and support systems to helping move this work forward in North Carolina. They work for different organizations, but as a team always to bridge the digital divide here in North Carolina. First, we'll hear from Amy Huffman, who's the Digital Inclusion and Policy Manager for the North Carolina Department of Information Technology, not just a leader in North Carolina, but recognized nationally as one of the models you should put your digital inclusion plan after. After Amy, we'll hear from Maggie Woods, who's the Program and Policy Manager for the Institute of Emerging Issues. Through Maggie's leadership, IEI has created a one-of-a-kind program called Band NC that Land to Sky was a grant recipient of last year. Without much further ado, I will let them get started.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's so nice to be here with all of you. And that was such a generous introduction. Thank you, Sarah. I really appreciate it. And am I going to share my screen in the slides?
I'm sharing that.
Oh, great. Okay.
There we go.
Perfect. Well, I have to say, it's not only a pleasure to be here, but it's so exciting. I really want to start with giving you all 96 participants of you, a lot of credit for being here, showing up in January at 10 o'clock. This work I find super exciting, and you should know that not many other communities across the country are doing this kind of work, and you are leaders in this, and we are so excited to be walking with you through this. So I'm going to briefly give an intro into our office and what we do, and talk a little bit about how digital inclusion, what it looks like in the state. So again, as Sarah said, I'm Amy Huffman. I'm with the Broadband Infrastructure Office. We're housed in the Department of Information Technology at the state, and I'm the Digital Inclusion and Policy Manager, which basically means I work with you all to help close the digital divide in your communities and support you in those efforts. Next slide, please. And the Broadband Infrastructure Office, it's our vision that every North Carolinian should be able to access affordable high-speed broadband anywhere, at any time. Next slide. And we do that in a number of ways. So through policy, for example, we released our state broadband plan in 2016. We're in the middle of updating that right now. Through different partnerships and programs, partnerships like this partnership with you all and with IEI, those things are critical for us to do this work, because this is a big state, as you all know, and the digital divide is wide and vast. And so we could not do our work without partnerships. We also have a technical assistance team. I'm sure many of you have met my colleague, Keith Conover, who is the boots on the ground in your region. They do amazing work, and they also have developed a community broadband playbook and helping communities pull together plans and things like that to move the needle in terms of increasing broadband access. We do a lot of data collection, analysis, and mapping. As you may know, we actually have a survey that's live right now that citizens can use to or you all can use to gather data for what's going on in your communities on speeds, and then also locations of where access is not available. We can talk more about that if you're interested, but that's the type of thing we do. We gather that data so that we can inform policymakers here at the state level, but also the federal level, and inform all the dollars that are available for increasing broadband access. And we also have our rural grant program, which is called the GREAT Grant, Growing Rural Economies with Access to Technology. And that is what it sounds like. It is intended to increase last mile service in areas across the state that are unserved. Next slide, please. So today we're here to talk about digital inclusion. I know many of you are probably more well-versed on broadband access needs in your community than I am. And in this discussion, we do not at all want to minimize the challenges that not having literal access to your home causes. That story of the student in Madison County, those are the types of stories that just spur our office to do what we do and encourage us to continue this work, even when it's frustrating. But in addition to broadband access, broadband adoption is also a big challenge here in the state. And so what I like to start with is to talk about why broadband adoption matters. So we like to think about broadband as really two sides of the same coin. So it's first, there's broadband access. So the access to the literal pipes and wires to a person's home. And we do measure that to a person's home. We don't think just having it in a community is enough. It needs to come to people's homes. And then there's adoption. And that's really when a household subscribes to the internet in their home and has the ability to do that. And it's important that people subscribe to it in their home because you actually don't see the economic impact that you would like to see that broadband has the capability of having in a community until people subscribe to it in your home. Now, this makes sense, right? If you don't have it, you can't use it. You can't use it for healthcare or education or running a business from your home. But there's actually been research that's shown that this is the case. And so in rural communities particularly, if a community has a lot of access, but people don't subscribe to it, it actually doesn't have any sort of an economic positive impact. Next slide. So what does broadband adoption look like in North Carolina? Well, we're a little bit behind the national average, to be honest. And when you look at any speed threshold, we are a couple points behind. So we're at about 78.3%. And then when you look at 25 megabits download, 3 megabits upload, which is the current definition that the Federal Communications Commission uses to define broadband, about 62.6% of our households across the state subscribe to internet in their home. So, inversely, that's almost 40% of our households across the state that don't subscribe to broadband at what we call a meaningful speed in their home. That's a lot. That's a lot of households. That's a big challenge. Next slide. So really why households may not subscribe is the next question. There's multiple reasons and they are interrelated. Of course, if you don't have access to it, you can't subscribe. So we know many households in Western North Carolina don't have the option to subscribe because it's not available to them. But the other big barrier, and I think it was borne out in that data that Sarah talked about at the beginning, is because of cost. So cost is a major factor, and many households across the state only have access to one provider. So there's not enough competition, and those costs are higher in many areas because of that. Another big reason is because of a lack of digital literacy skills. Not having the skills and not feeling comfortable to use a device will prevent a household from subscribing, as well as not having a computer in the home. If you don't have a computer or working computer, you're unlikely to subscribe to the internet because you don't have something to use it with. One other factor is called relevancy. So not seeing how the internet impacts your daily life and can provide positive impacts on your life. However, I think what I've been saying is I believe my prediction is in a couple of years when we have more data on what things are like right now, that the pandemic will have done away with that factor. I think right now everyone sees the relevancy of broadband and why they need it in their home. It's just they may not be able to get it because of cost or whatnot. So quickly, I'm going to go through some definitions just to make sure we're all on the same table, to table set and level set here. So we all are working from the same place. I know many of you know these already, but just want to make sure we're at the same place. So the digital divide is what refers to the gap between those who have access to the technology, the internet, and digital literacy training, and those who don't. Next slide, please. And so digital equity is what we call it's our goal. So we believe that digital equity is a condition in which all individuals and communities have the necessary capacity needed for full participation in society, democracy, and economy. We also believe that it's necessary for civic and cultural participation, employment, and lifelong learning. So this is our goal as a state, to reach a digitally equitable state. Next slide, please. So then digital inclusion, which Nathan did a wonderful job of describing earlier, is how we get there. Digital inclusion are the activities, the programs, the policies. This thing that you're at right now, this is digital inclusion. This is what helps us get to a digitally equitable state, to a digitally equitable Buncombe County, Transylvania, Henderson. This is what will help us get to that next level. Next slide, please. So what you're here to do today is really exciting. You're here to learn, to start to build a digital inclusion plan for your community. And Land of Sky has received a grant to help start this process with you all. And we think digital inclusion plans are really a helpful starting place for beginning to close the digital divide in your community, for reaching that digitally equitable state. However, we know that digital inclusion planning is new to many of you. But really, I want to encourage you that for most of you in this on this call or presentation, it really isn't that new. So a digital inclusion plan is not that different from a community economic development plan, or from a vision, or a community vision, or a community strategic plan. It's not that different. And the process you're going to take to get to this plan is not that different. But we don't want it to be cumbersome on you, and we don't want it to be a difficult lift for you and your community, particularly now in the middle of a pandemic when you have thousands of other things to deal with. And so what Maggie and I did is we came up with a template that you can use to begin to build your plan. And so you have some ready-made places and information that you, or little spots and things that you can figure out what you need to build this plan. So quickly, I'm just going to kind of go over what this template looks like broadly. As you get into this process, you'll start to peel back the layers and fill in the template and gather more information. You'll see what it looks like more granularly. But broadly, the plan template is, we think every digital inclusion plan will probably have like 3 major sections. So you'll have a section where you're creating a collective vision. What does digital equity look like in your community? What do you want that to look like in Buncombe County? And then what should digital inclusion, what should your goals be? And how are you going to get there? And how are you going to measure that? So that's the collective visioning section of your plan. And then you're going to look at what the digital divide looks like currently in your community. What assets do you have in place? Because every community has wonderful assets. I will say right now, 97 of your best assets are on this call right now. What other assets, what other physical assets do you have? And then what are your gaps? So you know, how do we fill those gaps? And then you'll want to talk about in your plan, how are you going to reach that future vision that you set out in the beginning? Knowing where you are right now and knowing where you need to go, how are you going to reach those goals? And so that's the reaching the future vision section of the plan. Next slide, please. So as you embark on this work, I just want to encourage you that you all are doing exactly what the first thing I advise communities to do when I talk to them about digital inclusion, and that is to find your friends. So today you're here, you're talking with Sarah and Nathan and Maggie and I, and in a minute you will also be talking with other folks in your community about digital inclusion and looking at ways that you guys can figure out what assets you have. And this is so important because you cannot do this work alone. And so the first thing I encourage people to do is to collaborate and partner and find folks in their community to do this work with. And so I just want to encourage you that you're doing that already. You're already well on your way. And I'm really excited to see what the future holds for you all as you build these plans, and then also begin to implement them. And just know that we're here to support you every step of the way. And with that, I will turn it over to Maggie, and she will talk a little bit more about WNC and some other things that are coming up.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Amy. Really appreciate that introduction. I'm Maggie Woods. I'm a policy and program manager at the Institute for Emerging Issues. And I just wanted to start by thanking everyone for being on the call today. I'm really just reiterating what Amy said, but I don't know if you know it, but you are truly pioneers in this work. Digital inclusion is a fairly new term. Digital inclusion planning is new, though of course it is similar to other kinds of community strategic planning. But nationally, there's only maybe a dozen cities that have digital inclusion plans. So the fact that you are here today, the fact that Land of Sky is leading this effort to create plans in their 4 counties, this is huge. So thank you for being here and taking the time today. And thank you to Land of Sky for leading this effort. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what Band NC is, since this project is funded by Band NC, and then ways that you all can get involved. But before I do, I just want to introduce who the Institute for Emerging Issues is, and you can see that on this next slide. If you haven't connected with us before, we are a public policy center based out of NC State University. We have a big, bold mission, and that is to make North Carolina a more vibrant and economically competitive state for everyone. The way we do this is by shining a light on issues that we think are important to the state, that we think are stuck in some way or need attention. And about 1.5 years ago, we identified the digital divide and digital inclusion as one of those issues. And we brought a bunch of people together in an emerging issues forum, a big in-person convening, which is not possible anymore. But we brought a bunch of people together in February. And then the pandemic hit and positioned us to work on this issue and expand this issue. And so that's how we founded Band NC. And if you go to the next slide, you can see that Band NC has a goal to equip counties to meet needs and build more digitally equitable communities. But ultimately, we want to make North Carolina the first state in the nation where every single county has a digital inclusion plan in place. Currently, there's only 1 county with a digital inclusion plan in place, so we've got a ways to go, which is why we're here, and we're so happy to be here. The way that Band NC has worked is that we launched a summer grant program. This grant program was really to meet immediate digital needs due to the pandemic, but also to encourage communities to find innovative solutions to the digital divide. And so we launched that this summer, more to come on that in just a second. This fall, we also, in partnership with Amy and the Broadband Infrastructure Office, led a series of workshops on how to build a digital inclusion plan. And I know many folks from Land of Sky joined those workshops. And then we're gearing up for this spring, where we are going to launch another round of funding for communities that have developed those digital inclusion plans to help support the implementation of those plans. So moving on to the next slide, I'm just going to give you some fast facts about what was accomplished in these first couple rounds of Band NC. This summer cycle, we were able to fund 29 projects in 39 counties. We know that 14 of those counties are supporting digital inclusion plans through this project. That is huge. 14 counties in North Carolina are working on digital inclusion plans, including the 4 counties represented here. So while y'all are pioneers, while this is brand new, there are other people across the state who are working alongside you in their communities trying to figure this out as well. So we have this great community of people working on this together. We had great turnout to these fall digital inclusion plan meetings. We actually had 46 counties represented in those workshops. So we know there are other people who are interested in this work. Moving on to the next slide, I just also want to highlight where Band NC grantees are. Since we are talking to the western part of the state today, you can see that we've been really happy to fund a lot of projects in the western part of the state, not just Land of Sky. And you can learn more about all of those grantees on our website because there are other pioneers like yourselves who are working really hard in this space. And then finally, moving on to the next slide, just want to talk about what's next. In a couple weeks, Amy and I are going to launch another workshop. This is a continuation of our fall workshops, talking about digital inclusion plan visioning. So really talking about that. How do you create that vision statement for digital inclusion in your community? And then pretty soon we will be launching the spring Band NC grant cycle. And this actually might be a spring and summer grant cycle. So a lot more to follow on that. But really excited to be here today. I'll drop my contact information in the chat and would be happy to connect with any and all of you. And I'll hand this back to Land of Sky.
Thank you so much, Maggie and Amy. I'm Erica Anderson of Land of Sky Regional Council, and we are so grateful for the leadership of our region's elected officials in broadband and digital inclusion efforts. And I'm very pleased and appreciative we are joined today by commissioners from each of our counties. I'd like to introduce Buncombe County Commissioner Terry Wells to lead us off.
Thank you, Erica. Yes, I'm newly elected Buncombe County Commissioner Terry Wells, and it's great to see so many familiar faces on here and so many of our community members that I work with actually across all 4 counties. So thank you all for joining us. Those of you who know me know I've been very focused and passionate about this for basically the past 5 years and been working with Sarah quite a while. So I'm thrilled to see so many people who care about this and who are here and participating, because it's really important to our communities. We would be dismayed if people did not have access to affordable and reliable water and electricity in their homes today. However, there are so many of our neighbors who do not have access to affordable, reliable broadband, which is a 21st century utility and necessity. And we need a sense of urgency for the health, the education, the civic engagement, and the economic well-being of our community members. And to ensure full participation of citizens in our community, our citizens must have affordable daily access to the internet at speeds, quality, and the capacity necessary to accomplish common tasks, with the digital literacy skills necessary to participate online and on a personal device in a secure, convenient network. It is so easy to make assumptions that everyone has access, but that is coming from a place of privilege, because what we often have, we take for granted. So I want you to think about this. Think about the person who isn't able to research their symptoms and medications, or who isn't able to access the online portal to receive doctor's correspondence or make appointments. Many of our most vulnerable do not have access, and this impacts their health outcomes. We should all be aware of the homework gap by now. And that gap widens as those who have access and skills are able to further their education and create content, potentially leading to further opportunities. Access and skills provide opportunity, and opportunity leads to innovation. And we want engaged and informed citizens who are able to fully participate in programs and services. We want this for everyone in our community, not just those of privilege, but everyone needs a voice at the table. And we want our community members to be able to have the skills and resources they need to be successful in the ever-changing job market. And on a regional level, recently I saw that Nathan sent out an economic outlook note, and in that he mentioned that people, I think a lot because of the pandemic even, people are wanting to move to rural areas with hopes of working remotely. Well, we have to have high quality broadband then, if they're going to be able to do that. And additionally, in order to attract high quality employers, we need not only high quality broadband infrastructure, but the highly skilled people as well. Thus, we must ensure that we have intentional strategies and investments to reduce and eliminate barriers to access and use of technology. Otherwise, we will have community members who are left behind, leading to generational consequences. We want all of our community members to have educational and economic opportunities to pursue their goals and thrive, and the access to information and resources that will increase their civic engagement and their health outcomes. Our community can only be as strong and healthy as the individuals who live here. And it is incumbent upon us to work together to ensure that we address the information and communication technology barriers to full participation in our community. And I believe then we will be inspired by the stories and successes of how our citizens and community are thriving. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wells. Next, I'd like to introduce Henderson County Commissioner Rebecca McCall.
Thank you very much for asking me to be a part of this. I'm very passionate about broadband and the availability in our area. We have used the internet quite extensively to share information But in April, we found ourselves scrambling, if you will, to have more capability. All of a sudden, we were having to have Zoom meetings and provide updates on the impact of COVID in our area. And most recently, we're providing information about vaccines. But the problem that we run into is that we assume that everyone is receiving this information. And like we heard earlier, probably only 60%, if that many people, are actually receiving the information that we're putting out there, which leaves a lot of people totally out of the loop unless they have friends that keep them updated or other means to find out the information. Even I have switched over to getting my news from the newspaper online, but not everybody has that capability. As far as the schools go, all of a sudden we were having to go to virtual learning. And this has, as you know, as all of you know, this has put a lot of strain on everything, especially those in the rural areas. And that was an interesting story shared earlier about the child who had to drive to the top of the mountain to download their homework. I actually have 4 grandchildren right now in my house on virtual learning from grades 2 up to 8. So if there's a child walks through and asks the question, you know what that's all about. But we did open up better availability through our libraries. We beefed up the broadband access through the libraries that you could actually access it in the parking lots if necessary. I know that places like McDonald's were very generous with providing access, but that's not ideal. I mean, we have a story that I can share is a sheriff's deputy saw a couple of high school kids sitting outside of McDonald's back in the September timeframe, working on their Chromebooks in the parking lot, just sitting at a bench outside. And that's not ideal. That's not what we want for our children. We did also provide a lot of hotspots, and even being able to get those hotspots was a challenge, not to mention the cost of them. But right now, sporting events are being provided over the internet, and the school board meetings and all that sort of thing. But what about personal needs? The needs of our citizens? Job searches are all online. Applying for unemployment is online. Don't even try to pick up the phone to apply for unemployment because it's not going to work. If you can't do it online, then you're probably out of luck. And working from home, all of a sudden offices closed down. People were sent home and told to work from home. And unless if you didn't have that capability, you were in trouble. Most recently, virtual doctor visits. My father was taken to the hospital on Monday, and he has a follow-up visit with his doctor on tomorrow, actually, and it's virtual. Well, if it wasn't for me, he wouldn't be able to attend that visit because he's 92 years old and he struggles with even looking at email. And economic development, though, is probably where we have used it the most because we have to continue to develop our area economically, and we're able to reach out to industrial companies who want to possibly come to our area. We've been able to give them virtual tours of not only area, but facilities that are available and properties that are available. And that has really worked well for us. The problems that we run into, of course, are availability in the remote areas. Out in the Mills River area, you can't even get, and there's areas out there you can't even get a cell phone signal, much less broadband. And if you could get it, can you afford it? Not everybody can afford it. That might be a lot of what those 40% are struggling with is the affordability. And then just the ability to use it. If you have it, you can afford it, you can get it, but do you know how to use it? My 90-year-old mother doesn't know how to use it. She's still trying to figure out how the fax machine works. We have teachers who all of a sudden had to teach online, but older teachers that maybe weren't as savvy with the technology, but they have learned. We have classes available through the Blue Ridge Community College, online classes, but in order to do an online class, you've got to know how to get online. And then, so to me, that's one of the bigger problems, the availability, the cost, and then educating people on how to use it. 60% of our population is over the age of 65. If we go completely to a virtual society, we're going to lose a lot of our citizens. Thank you for giving me the time today.
Thank you, Commissioner McCall. Next, we'll go to Transylvania County Commissioner Jason Chappell.
Thank you, and I just want to say it's a privilege to be here today. Let me really begin by just saying thank you for the Institute. Thank you for Land and Sky for helping to arrange this. This is such a key and important issue for our community. And thank you for all the individuals out there that have logged in this morning. We talked about it briefly. I guess maybe before the meeting actually started. We haven't lost sight of the fact that we're having to do this kind of summit online. That shows where we're at right now, but the needs that we truly have. In Transylvania County, we're a rural county, appreciate the broadband and the internet connectivity that we do have, but we need a lot more. Proactively, our Transylvania County Commissioner sometime back provided Wi-Fi at our 9 of our community centers to try to help those individuals that don't have access to at least have a spot where they could potentially be able to connect. But truthfully, when COVID hit, we saw how the connectivity, how the availability of this was just stretched too thin. The demand was so great on libraries, on our community centers, where we were providing those Wi-Fi spots. We saw a great need. We continue to see a great need. I will say I want to brag on our Transylvania County school system. Thankfully, proactively, they have been providing Chromebooks earlier on before COVID hit. So we were, in Transylvania County, we were better positioned somewhat to transition to that online learning. But I'm gonna put a different hat on other than a county commissioner hat, if I may, or 2 different hats, I guess. First, I have a 2nd grader and an 11th grader trying to do online learning at home. Where I live in a very rural community. We have the best that we can get that's available, but there's still time when they're both trying to connect, both trying to do video conferences, chats, doing those homeworks. We have stagnant. We have issues where screens freeze. We have where we can't download the information. We have to wait. We have to do things differently. That's just in my household. I know the effect. Much less, let's compound that county-wide, where we have access, we have citizens that don't have any access. We have citizens that don't have the technology, much less the capability of the connectivity. So we have some great challenges. In Transylvania County, we've been working for a long time to try to diversify our employment opportunities and create career pathways for our citizens. Access to reliable broadband is important to recruit these new companies coming into our community. Our manager, I talked to our manager sometime back, and she said something, as we're talking about definitions. We'll talk about definitions a lot today through this summit and moving forward, but she had a definition of digital inclusion, and I'd like to read it if I can. Digital inclusion is about connecting people to commerce, education, employment, and many other opportunities and resources. Local government has always facilitated that citizens have equal access to basic services. And as broadband becomes more intrinsic to all that we do, this means we need to advocate for this access to digital technology for all. We have many challenges ahead, but with the individuals that are on this call or on this Zoom meeting today, we have some great opportunities. I thank the partners that's already laid the foundation, but now's the time that we need to step forward. Now's the time that we need to go forward as a community, and it's going to take a regional effort. I don't believe any individual county can do it on their own. I appreciate comments from other county commissioners already and one following as well, but it's going to take all of us for what we do. Just thank you, and just thank you for all that you do.
Thank you, Commissioner. And both Commissioners Chappell and McCall pointed this out, and I'd like to just state that we do acknowledge that having a digital inclusion plan digitally is leaving out some community members. So we acknowledge that and just wanted to put that out there. And last but not least, we'd like to welcome Madison County Commissioner Michael Garrison.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's exciting for me. I listened to some of this and I wonder why we didn't do this years ago. Being able to remote and Zoom and all the things that broadband is bringing, not just to our county, but I think to our nation as well. And I'm here just representing Madison County. The reality of it is a lot of the real work that's been done for broadband enhancement here in our county has been done through our Economic Development Director, Terry Bellamy, and I appreciate her work. And also through Mitch Hampton and the Economic Development Board, Mitch is chairman, our library staff, former county manager Forrest Gilliam and the work he did, and also with the Land to Sky, Sarah and Nathan, your leadership is tremendous in seeing these endeavors come to fruition. So I appreciate that. I also have a share screen, if we could get that up.
Can you guys see that? Yes, okay.
I appreciate Dr. Bellamy taking the time to put this together for me as well. Our endeavors really started back in 2016 as part of developing the priorities, the collaboration, and the results of moving forward with our broadband initiatives and our technology. Second slide. Part of the thing was developing our priorities. This actually started with a survey that was developed in 2016 to identify the needs and services we needed here in Madison County. And that was a collaborative effort that a lot of people were a part of to take the results of those surveys and then help create some short-term priorities to increase our services. Looking at the not just the unserved, but also the underserved areas in our county. People that have broadband service, the quality of the service they have, and also the cost or the affordability of having those services, and then developing some strategies to be able to align funding opportunities to address those particular resource needs. Some additional priorities we had as well were to develop a comprehensive map of our county as far as broadband services and also cellular services. That survey is a part of that, and that is still an ongoing endeavor that we're part of as a collective group, as a part of our comprehensive plan. And some of that was creating and implementing some public awareness campaigns. You can have surveys all day long, but if you don't have folks that are educated as to what they're for and having them fill those out, then so it's useless. Internet survey access, also doing local paper, public endeavors, anything we can do to put out the information we need those filled out. And the big thing for Madison County is, as many rural counties, is having limited funding to be able to push forward these initiatives. And thanks to Dr. Bellamy and all the staff and the folks at Land to Sky that have helped us with these and all the state resources, we've been able to acquire a pretty significant amount of partnership funding through two $50,000 grants from the Department of Health, or Natural and Cultural Resources, that came through Governor Cooper's Hometown Strong initiatives. We also were able to, even prior to the school system, which has done an excellent job in our county, but even prior to that, in March of this year, March 24th, the county government went ahead and coordinated with the U.S. Cellular to provide hotspots for students to be able to do remote learning. And this only 2 weeks after President Trump had declared a national emergency. So we were already ahead of the curve when it came to those things. And then moving forward with the endeavors to $60,000 in support for free downtown initiative projects. Those took place in Mars Hill, Marshall, and Hot Springs. The opportunity to be able to afford broadband access to folks that wanted to come and utilize it. And the libraries also did some of those same initiatives that we'll mention. We also, Madison County has approved $15,000 for our historic Mars Hill, Anderson, Rosenwald rehabilitation project. And part of that funding is intended to set up internet access for students and visitors to that school to learn about some of the rich history of the Rosenwald project. So that's a really good initiative that reaches to the basic levels of our community. Also collaborating with Land to Sky Regional Councils provided tremendous assistance. And we talk about that broadband community profile and looking forward to two Appalachian regional grants that help support the downtown Wi-Fi projects in the town of Marshall and Mars Hill. And also Maggie mentioned the Band NC. We actually were, through our staff, were able to acquire a grant for that to develop Madison County's digital inclusion plan. And we're hearing a lot of talk about that plan, and that plan's a necessity for us to be able to move forward with understanding what the needs are and being able to allocate funding resources to meet those needs. So that digital inclusion plan is a huge part of what we're involved in as well. Also collaboration with the Madison County's Broadband Committee. Back in early part of 2020, our Economic Development Advisory Board provided information requested the county create its own broadband committee, and that committee is a plethora of people that are mixed across our county of public, private, the health, education, state, and community. And the objectives are actually working together in the overall goal to improve our broadband access. So that's pretty exciting work that's being done, and to increase the number of Madison County residents who have high-speed access to internet. Better depiction of that is also taking place through our surveys and the availability we have. Currently, the survey as of January the 7th, we have 867 residents who've completed the survey and the speed test, and that represents about 8.2%. So we still got a long ways to go in getting the numbers. We're actively campaigning to encourage people to be a part of that. And of course, the overall effort was mentioned earlier, was to reduce that digital divide. Larrabee Systems done a great job of that. They partnered with NC Works Madison to offer some locations for folks to come and do the NC Works website. It's free of cost, so it allows them access to employment opportunities, and they can even access these during the weekend. So that's a good partnership. Also, we have a public-private partnership that's been taking place with the Laurel community over at the old Laurel school building and the resource facility. And that partnership incorporated with French Broad Electric in the Laurel community to develop a partnership to use the facility to store electronic equipment in some of the rooms, and also to provide some internet or high-speed internet fiber access. The board actually, the economic board had actually wrote a grant and received a $50,000 funding to develop a computer lab so that the folks over in the Laurel community would have access to computers at no cost, of course. And the interesting thing to know is when you look at all of these resources and the funding partnerships that the folks here in Madison County have worked hard through other initiatives to glean over $10,306,000 in funding to support the expansive broadband internet service in our county. And so that's pretty significant. It takes these partnerships to be able to make those things happen. The community and economic development staff are currently actively participating in surveys and webinars, seminars, conference calls, virtual meetings, all of those designed to support the initiatives of broadband access for the folks here in Madison County. So it's pretty exciting work that's going on, and that all takes place through a lot of entities: the North Carolina Department of Information Technology, Broadband Infrastructure Office, in partnership with the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. The Office of Rural Health was rewarded $633,940 by the Appalachian Regional Commission. And so we see a lot of these things taking place. Also a matching award. We talked earlier in reference to the Dogwood Health Trust, $97,200 for a healthy and connected workforce. And building these robust, inclusive programs does a lot. And somebody mentioned earlier, and I think it's a valid point as well, we talk about telehealth. We talk about the ability of healthcare and economic opportunities for our vulnerable and disadvantaged groups. I'm with the Sheriff's Office part-time, and interestingly enough, we do the telehealth services, which is help provided through an Appalachian Regional Committee grant. So there's a lot of things that are taking place as part of that huge amount of money that's been poured into these initiatives. So I'm glad to be a part of that, and I appreciate the opportunity to share some of those endeavors that are taking place.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Now we'd like to, Sarah, are you introducing Sabrina?
I have maybe good news and bad news. So Sabrina emailed me this morning, and it's not uncommon for us to have certain kinds of issues with internet connectivity, especially at stuff like this. But something more unusual, she lost her power this morning. Sabrina was with NDIA. She did have a good presentation for us about what's going on nationally. And if we can get her in later and we have enough time, then we'll do that. She even tried to get an Airbnb somewhere else to do it. So she certainly made all the efforts, but it looks like 500,000 people out. I think she's in Washington, lost power. So disappointed about that, but we were at time to go into the breakouts anyway. So what is going to happen with that? Through the magic of Zoom, hopefully this will work well and you will go into a room with others in your community that we've pre-assigned. So we did our best to get maybe a county or a region that you work in. We didn't get it right all the time. I know we didn't, but we hope that you'll join us and bring your talents and your thoughts into your session, where some of the documents that Amy was referencing earlier will come up. We have the template set up with leaders in those rooms to facilitate those conversations. So what we want you to be thinking about is to capture what's good in your community. So maybe a provider is offering a discount program. We saw a lot of that pop up this year. Your library offers a lending program. The community college has public Wi-Fi. Put that down in here. And then we'll move on to another section that will help us identify where those gaps are, what still needs to happen. I want to note that in the, there's more that unifies us than divides us right now, but there may be people in your room that come from a different perspective on this. So, be considerate of who all is in there, that they might have a different, maybe it's that their business has a different perspective of this, or that personally they think that there's a different level of involvement. I think all of that is fair, and we want to capture all of that in these plans. So without much further ado, we're going to attempt Zoom magic here. Thank you guys for participating in that. I got to peek in on some of those Google Sheets, and I popped around in some of the sessions. Looked like really good conversations. Just so that we kind of connect regionally, I'm going to ask the leaders of those groups to give me like a 1-minute digest of what they saw in their rooms, starting with, let's start with Henderson County. And I had to work on the muting situation here. I had Maggie. That one.
Awesome. Can you all hear me now? Great. Yeah, we had a great group. It was small but mighty. And we were able to go through all of the asset inventory. We didn't get past that. We had a lot of technical knowledge on the call. So spent a lot of time talking through what providers were serving the county. We actually had a representative of AT&T on the call, which is great. Always great to see internet service providers a part of the conversation. And really talk through what public Wi-Fi is available. And then as we got through the digital literacy assets and some of the individual support and public computer access points, that's where we were doing some Googling. We were trying to see, we found out that Henderson Schools has a one-to-one program, but as well as some businesses are providing public Wi-Fi right now. We did have a lot of question marks. So anything with a question mark in here is kind of like for further review and research, but we had a really robust conversation. Everyone was very engaged, and we got a really good start on the asset inventory. And if anyone, I'm representing Henderson County. If anyone has more to add who is in the group, feel free to add in the chat.
Right. This is just the first of what we see being a collaboration. We know not everyone could make it today, but we want to capture opinions and information as we can. Next, let's move to Madison County, and I had Terry Bellamy leading that conversation.
Thank you, Sarah. Our group was able to complete the form and also provide some additional information. A couple of things that we did identify, there are some people who are not at the table and who are not included, including the housing authorities, currently underserved areas, older workers, school-age children without access at the home, seniors, fixed income populations. And so our commitment is we created some results of how to change our ecosystem that will be inclusive. And so we appreciate this opportunity to serve, and we're excited about the next step.
Great, Terry. Next, I had Erica Anderson in one of the Buncombe County rooms.
Hi. We had a very dynamic group and a lot of expertise on the call. So we talked a lot about the current status, where there is broadband, where there are some gaps, some of the programs that exist right now to serve, like the FCC Lifeline program, and then some areas of where there are computer and hotspot lending programs at the libraries, and made a note of, kind of started on the partnerships piece and didn't get all the way down to the final step, but it was a really good conversation to get us going.
Great, thank you, Erica. Yvette in Transylvania County.
Hi, we had a great group and we got through the asset section, and we had a lot of good conversation. I feel that we definitely need like another hour to do this together, because there was so much more to talk about. I'm really glad about everybody that I got to see their faces today that I hadn't already seen. I think that we should continue talking, and highly encourage everybody in our Transylvania County group to sign up for the next one of these, so that we can really get the rubber to meet the road. We just have to work on access and devices and lowering the cost for our county. And Carol was helping me take notes. Oh, Sarah, some people in my group didn't have a copy of what I was scrolling through. What's the best way for everyone to get that? Can you email it back out?
Yeah, we can share that Google Doc with everyone, that template we're using.
Great. And that, I feel like it's just the beginning. It's very exciting. So if anybody else from my group wanted to say something, like Maggie said, they can kind of put it in the chat, but that's all I've got for now.
Great, thank you. And Transylvania County's major provider Comporium was just awarded a big, great grant that we're very excited about. Buncombe County also had a project with the co-op win an award. So we're going to see hopefully some big things happening in access across the region over the next couple of years. I had Buncombe County had so many people participate. I had 2. So we're going to go to Amy Huffman to talk about what they learned in their group.
Well, I learned that Buncombe County is I've done a lot of this work already. That's what I learned. Tim Love from the county has already pulled together a great map on where access is unavailable. There was the group was just like such a brain trust. There was a lot of information that this group already knew. So the fact that we weren't able to get through the inventory is totally a reflection on me, and that I probably talked too much and not the group in the room, because they already had a lot of information. And there's a lot of really great work going on in Buncombe County that I'm really excited to see once all the pieces are put together, what that will look like, because I think there's just a lot of room for collaboration and opportunity. But yeah, great information. We didn't finish, but that's okay. And there's, yeah, looking forward to seeing what comes of it.
So I've been in communication with Sabrina, and she actually got a hotel room that she's getting into so that she can do her presentation. I know a lot of you are busy people, probably have other things to do. I think what we should do for the last little bit here is take some Q&A for our presenters. We'll have Erica moderate that. And if we get Sabrina in and people want to stay a little bit longer, you're welcome to. Don't feel obligated to, but she did have some interesting things to say about what's going to happen with funding that might come down the federal pipeline that many of you might be interested in. So I'll turn it over to Erica. If you have questions, go ahead and put them in that chat box for any of our speakers that are still around. You are on mute.
Sorry, I muted and unmuted. Sorry, everyone. I'm dropping each county profile plan that Sarah developed last year. Nathan started with Henderson and I followed suit with the other counties. So those are links to each of the plans if you're interested. They're on our website as well under West Engine Broadband. And I will scroll through the chat here to see if there are any questions. Please do drop them in here. We have so many folks on the call. It would be, it's easier and a little more streamlined if you can put your questions in there. I did have one I saw from Steve earlier today. So let me scroll up. It would be great if there was a way to make all the text a little bigger for those of us.
Well, how about this one from Carol Gardner?
Okay.
She's asking about policy, especially the General Assembly, to allow local government to participate in broadband infrastructures initiatives that was denied in the original grant legislation. Amy might be a good one for that.
I'm looking at the question too. I don't have an update on that. I would say, you know, the short session is kicking off, I believe this week, if not, or long session is not, if not this week, next week. I'd encourage you to contact your local representatives about that issue if that's something that you would like to see changed. That would be what I would say.
I found Steve's. Steve Garrison had asked, what impact do we anticipate on local efforts to expand broadband access due to the rollout of Elon Musk's Starlink programming? Amy, to you.
So Starlink is Elon Musk's satellite company, low Earth satellite, for those of you that don't know. They did receive funding through the Federal Communications Commission's latest auction called RDOF. However, that's not finalized yet. I need to be clear about that, but that's not finalized. There's a lot of, I'm just going to say bureaucracy that has to happen first. So there's a lot of steps that have to happen before that's all finalized. And so we won't really know for some time. I will say there's a couple pilots going on with them, and they are currently putting satellites in the sky in low Earth orbit on a pretty regular basis. And so they will be a big player in the future. To what extent and what that looks like, I'm not entirely sure. We'll find out more.
Thanks, Amy. New technology is happening.
Yes.
And here's another. What efforts, if any, are underway at the state level to coordinate broadband expansion with large utility infrastructure providers? Is this potentially discussing like a one dig policy with DOT or other utility infrastructure?
So we are in the process of working on a dig once policy with the State Department of Transportation. And I believe there was a policy that was put forward last year or the year before about utility poles. I didn't need to go back and check on that. I don't know if that answers your question or not, Tim.
I know from working with DOT that that's something that we continually discuss is having a schedule of when infrastructure is either going in or being replaced or addressed in some way, whether that's any kind of roadway, greenway, you name it, that we kind of have a heads up or a plan when they're bidding those out, so that we can also go in and discuss with our local governments and others, potentially the private sector as well, to almost have an open call. I think Keith had introduced this a while ago, a few years back even, that making that opportunity available for providers to lay fiber wouldn't be a bad thing. So I think that's something that we're talking about as we move forward. Okay.
And I'm unmuting Dr. Cedarberg and Senator Van Dyne to weigh in on that.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, and Keith.
To weigh in on the issue of legislation, I think Nathan Ramsey just made a comment, and I think he's absolutely right. The tension between private providers is still a real thing in the General Assembly. So, you know, we need more advocacy.
Keith or Dr. Cedarberg, are you?
I'll be glad to chat if Bill doesn't want to, or maybe I can turn it over to Bill. First, the question on local municipalities and government entities participating in broadband deployment. They've never not been allowed to participate in broadband deployment. They're not allowed to be a provider, but any local entity is allowed to provide funding to help companies provide service. We recommend an RFP to do that, but counties have done it. It's been done. It continues to be done. And as long as you do an RFP, and typically they include us, we put it on our website, we put it in our social media. So it is a practice that can be done. If the question is, can they provide service? The answer right now is no, and that's a legislative issue. And I would be careful on that because municipal broadband has been successful, but it also has not been successful. So that's a topic that the folks in the legislature who do what they do so well, they create the environment that I operate in, and that's the environment that I operate in. The other question had to do with large utilities. We've had a lot of success, for example, with electric membership co-ops. A good example of that locally is French Broad. French Broad has gotten millions of dollars in federal money and now state money because when they built their infrastructure, their fiber infrastructure, they peppered the landscape with splices with an eye towards broadband. Not every electric co-op did that. And where they did not do that, makes it difficult to come back. You almost have to redeploy the entire network route in that case. French Broad did not do that. They had an eye towards the future. And as a result, have done well with funding. So that covers just, kind of those two items. I hope that was helpful. All yours, Bill.
Bill is muted, Sarah, I think.
Bill, you should have a note to unmute.
There we go. Is that, did that unmute me?
You're good.
We hear you now.
Oh, thank you. I just want to respond. I think Keith and former Senator Terry did a good job on that one question. I wanted to respond to two other things that just came up. One is about SpaceX. And we have some excellent resource people in the county that, in the region, that are really helping with that. Stag Newman and Greg Voigt. And they're doing quite an in-depth analysis of what that technology will mean for Western North Carolina. And the essence of their conclusions, I think, is that don't count on it doing much because their capacity isn't large enough yet for such a large geographical area as we represent in the small population. So I think on SpaceX, time will tell, but it's not going to be a solution for 2021 or 2022. The second issue is on funding. And it's very clear that with the switch over to the Biden administration in Washington, we expect to see broadband receive a very high priority and a lot of substantially new money coming in from the federal government under different programs. And so I would encourage everybody interested in the digital divide, really watch what's happening in Washington and the possibility of funding through DC. And then right before Christmas, we had a caucus of area legislators on broadband. And there's general bipartisan agreement that broadband will be a very high priority in this coming legislative session. So expect for more grants to be available for the region. Expect for more federal money to be available. And the federal money is likely to have chunks of money available for the digital divide and digital redlining issues. So I'm very positive about what we have looking ahead. But the technology is not going to catch up immediately for us. There's a lot of hype going on about 5G. And I know Mike Tank is on from Spectrum and other providers might be on. It is unclear right now how accurate the maps are about 5G coverage and whether it's really 5G or whether it's 4G LTE coverage that's being talked about. So those are just words of caution from what we currently know. I'm taking up too much time right before lunch, so I'll shut up.
No, thanks, Bill, for that. And that's a great lead in. So if you're really interested in the deployment and the access issues surrounding digital inclusion, digital equity, we've been working in that space for a lot longer than we have expanded into the digital inclusion space with the West Engine initiative. And we will be partnering with the WNC Broadband Project, which Dr. Cedarberg and Stag and some of the others are leaders in that, for an event in mid-February. We've been looking at, we're getting a lot of questions about SpaceX, so we're looking at that as a potential topic, among others, local leaders being involved as well. So we'll be sending out follow-up information for you guys to participate on that. If you have specific questions you want us to address on what's coming down the pike in terms of policy and funding, go ahead and send that to us now so we can be prepared for those questions at that event. It looks like we still haven't seen from Sabrina, but she is promising she's having a hard time with the hotel internet. I think a lot of us have that experience. She says she'll be available to our group down in the future to support us moving forward. She apologizes for not getting through today. Personally, thank you so much for coming today. I hope that you found it informative and that you use this as just the first step of what will be a longer process of planning for digital inclusion in West North Carolina. With that, I'll give you back your day. Thank you and stay safe and healthy.